Naruto Uzumaki was not a normal boy by any means. Naruto Uzumaki wasn't your run-of-the-mill orphan. He was, as every orphan was, without a parent. He was, as every orphan was, lonely. He was, as every orphan was, sad. He wasn't, as almost every orphan was, looked at with pity and kindness, however. No, Naruto Uzumaki was looked at with disdain and hatred. Simply walking down the streets incurred several cruel beatings. He had no idea why, but the entire population of Konohagakure no Sato seemed to hate him. He had very few precious people. In fact, the only ones he could name off the top of his head were Hiruzen Sarutobi, or as he had dubbed the Hokage Gigi Ayam, a girl who helped her father run a nearby ramen shop, and Tuchi, the father of said girl. It was sad actually, a boy his age, 5, being hated by everyone. Naruto had learnt this early on in life. He was hated in the orphanage he lived in as well. Ever since he learned to walk on his own, the matron of the orphanage started treating him like trash. He was not allowed to play with the children of his age, and even when he managed to talk to them, they would sneer at him and told him, in no uncertain words, that a monster like him was not welcome in their group. He would get sad and then leave. Walking the streets of the village was like trial by fire for him. He had to take careful measures to remain as unnoticeable as possible. If he got noticed, a civilian would point at him, shouting to others, "The demon is here! Get him!" He would then run for his life, entering lanes and alleys, taking a shortcut through a shop, entering from the front door and exiting from the back, anything to get escape the beatings. But it was suspicious that a 4-year-old boy was able to escape from the mobs. What no one, including Naruto, knew that Naruto had some special quirks. Naruto had an eidetic memory, the ability to remember and recall anything he sees or hear once, in great detail. Naruto loved to read books, but didn't know why he could recall every page of the book, down to the exact words. He found it very useful and abused it shamelessly, reading all the books he was allowed to and then some, without telling anyone of course. He didn't tell this to anybody, not even Gigi, fearing if this got out, he would get beaten for having freakish traits. But he also discovered the downside of having such an ability. One day, when running from a mob, he accidentally entered an alley which had a dead end. There was no escape for him that day. He was punched, kicked on every part of his body, until he fell unconscious. When he woke up, very mysteriously, in his room at the orphanage, healed up, he was very happy he did not die. However, when he tried to sleep that night, the beatings came back in full force in the form of nightmares. Because of his ability, he experienced the beatings down to the last detail. He couldn't sleep peacefully for several nights. Another one of his quirks was a sort of sensory ability. He could sense danger if it was coming to him. However, it was a subconscious ability of sorts, activating only when he was in danger. But it was very useful in avoiding punches and stones that came when his back was turned. The village's behavior in general towards Naruto caused him to develop a need for positive attention, but also a need to avoid people, preferring to keep to himself. He would not actively seek attention, but he would latch on like a leech to anyone who gave some form of caring to him. Sadly, the number of people who did could be counted on one hand. That was the reason he turned to books. At least they didn't attack him outright and allowed him to read them. Almost no one wanted to associate with him, leading him to take refuge in books. They became his best friends, always making him smile when he learned something new. Naruto had to force himself to learn reading and writing as the teachers at the orphanage did as less as they could to help him. They would simply thrust the books in hands and go away to help other children. He learned early not to ask questions, receiving physical punishment whenever he did. He had read about various topics, but the one thing that stood out to him was the topic of Hokage. How the Hokage was the most powerful shinobi in the village and was responsible for the village's safety. He read how powerful was the Shodai Hokage, with his unique Kekkei Genkai, bloodline limit, of Mokuton, the wood release. He was said to be the most powerful shinobi of his time, known as Shinobi no Kami, the god of shinobi. Hashirama Senju, along with Madara Uchiha, were the two main founders of Konoha. Ironically, both were also bitter enemies. with Hashirama having to kill Madara to protect the village. The Naidame Hokage, Tobirama Senju, was the younger brother of Hashirama. He was and is still hailed as the most powerful Suiton water release user of all time. He was also hailed the fastest shinobi of his time, having created the famous Hiraishin no Jutsu. He was the one who started the Ninja Academy. Naruto took a liking to him as he loved anything that was even remotely associated with speed. The Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, that was his GG, was known as the Professor because he could use all the nature transformations and had the unsurpassed knowledge of ninjutsu, knowing all the techniques in Konoha, save for clan techniques. He also shared the title of Shinobi no Kami with Hashirama, because in his prime he was the strongest of all Kages. Naruto was astounded how powerful was the man he called his GG. Sarutobi was also the sensei of the Densetsu no Sannin, the 3 legendary ninjas, who were among the most powerful shinobi in the world. The Yondaime Hokage was the one who became his favorite to the point that Naruto considered him as his idol, aspiring to be like him. Minato Namikaze, when he was alive, was considered the strongest of the Hokages and arguably the most dangerous man to have graced the world of shinobi. Known as Konoha no Kiroi Senko, he was also considered the fastest shinobi to have ever lived. He was famous because he took the Hiraishin no Jutsu, the jutsu used by the Naidame, to levels unheard of. He was the one who single-handedly ended the Third Great Shinobi War, finishing of 1,000 IWA shinobi by himself in the Battle of Canopy Bridge. Naruto also took note that the Yondaime suspiciously looked very much like him if he grew up. Naruto compared their physical traits, more specifically those that stood out the most. They were both blonde, the hair color being near identical, with Naruto's a shade brighter. But the eyes were what took him by surprise. Those azure blue shades were what he had as well. Looking back at him in the mirror every day, he became even more suspicious. During one of his outings, when his GG came to take him to the Ichiraka ramen that he loved so much, he asked him what it meant to be Hokage. The old man stopped eating and looked at him, his eyes piercing him as if searching for something. He then smiled and said, "Perhaps you should ask me first, Naruto-kun, that what does it mean to be a shinobi?" Naruto looked surprised for a moment but recovered and asked, "What does it mean to be a shinobi?" This time Gigi answered, "To be a shinobi means to endure. A shinobi is one who can follow or lead others into any darkness and work together to overcome that darkness and make it out the other side. A shinobi walks towards danger when everyone else is running away. That is because it is the duty of a shinobi to look at any foe and simply say, 'Bring it.' That is because shinobi exists to protect those who can't protect themselves." Naruto had a look of wonder on his face. He had no idea Gigi was that wise. An answer like that changed Naruto's entire view of shinobi. At first he thought that being a shinobi only meant performing cool jutsus and fighting in the name of your village. He had no idea the answer would be this deep in meaning. Sarutobi looked at Naruto and mentally smiled. He knew about Naruto's treatment by the villagers and his drive to be Hokage. He mused, perhaps I can give him a little insight on what being a Hokage means. Naruto recovered from his wonder and stared at his empty bowl, deep in thought. If this is what being a shinobi meant, then he had a pretty good idea on what being a Hokage meant. He was snapped out of his thoughts when Gigi said, "Now that that answer is out of the way, I can tell you what being a Hokage dash. I know Gigi." Those words stopped Hiruzen in his tracks, his head tilting in curiosity. "You know what, Naruto-kun?" Naruto looked up, understanding and respect in his eyes. Hiruzen was touched at the respect he was receiving from Naruto, but his curiosity was increasing. What being a Hokage means? Hiruzen stared at him, silently asking him to continue. Naruto spoke up. "The Hokage is responsible for everything in this village. It's his responsibility to protect everyone here, and to make sure they are safe and happy with their village. He tends to the finances of this village, the rules, the daily events, everything. He controls every single ninja who bears a leaf headband, and basically directs when they live and die. This job is not for the faint of heart, and only for someone who loves this village deeply." At the end of his answer, he was staring back at his bowl. Hiruzen was shocked at the understanding Naruto showed of the position of Hokage. He had no idea that Naruto was this perceptive and knowledgeable. Tucci and Ayam had stopped working as well, staring at the blonde with wide eyes along with the Hokage. It was simply unheard of, a 5-year-old showing such a deep understanding of something most people don't understand until much later in life. Hiruzen was shocked so much that he didn't notice his jaw was hanging a bit. Such a deep perception and insight at such a young age. He thought with wonder. Only one person had showed such understanding like this, and he too was 3 years older. Itachi Uchiha was a prodigy among the likes of Kakashi Hatake and Minato Namikaze. Such a shame he was now a missing meme. Naruto looked up when he felt a hand on his shoulder. Gigi was looking at him with a strange expression. That is exactly what being Hokage means, Naruto-kun. A challenging smile broke out on Naruto's face and he declared, "Then I will become Hokage someday, Gigi. And not just any Hokage. I will be the strongest there will be." Hiruzen chuckled, which soon turned to laughter. The father and daughter on the other side of the counter were also smiling fondly. Naruto frowned. "What? I am serious." He was a little hurt that Gigi saw his declaration as a joke. Hiruzen soon calmed down, smiling fondly at the boy. He remembered another Uzumaki who used to say the same thing, but he had a strong feeling that Naruto would be right. He ruffled Naruto's head. "I know, Naruto-kun. I have no doubt you will." Ever since that day, Naruto studied even more rigorously and beginning physical training as well. Granted, a 4-year-old such as him could not do much, but he did his best. He ran 4 rounds around the village, did every exercise he could think of, and practiced his kunai and shuriken jutsu. He took those weapons by sneaking into the practice grounds and collecting them. To his surprise, the art of throwing shuriken and kunai came very naturally to him. He started throwing after taking a book about weapons left behind on a training ground. He had shaken his head at the disrespect shown to the book, but took it with him anyway. Just 2 weeks of practice and he was throwing all bullseyes. That was not the only surprising thing. He had found that he could recover very quickly from physical exhaustion and wear and tear on his muscles. He recalled that he recovered surprisingly quickly after the beating from the villagers. A bloodline, perhaps? He didn't dwell on it further, but filed it away for later. But today was special. So special that he would have to take extra measures in staying safe. Because today was his birthday, and he was just kicked out of the orphanage. Roaming in the streets, he suspected what would happen in the evening. Today was the day the villagers celebrated as the Kyuubi festival, the day the Yondaime defeated the Kyuubi, and the day he would be beaten within an inch of his life or hunted and possibly killed. An epiphany struck him like lightning, causing him to suddenly stop in middle of the street. Yondaime, Kyuubi's defeat, treatment of the villagers, Demon Boy, Gigi's avoidance of the topic. No, he wouldn't. Naruto ran from the street, meandering between people with the grace of a seasoned dancer or flowing water. He ran like it was no one's business, reaching his favorite spot, the head of the Yondaime, in record time. Anyone who saw him had flashbacks of another blonde running like a man possessed. "I need to confirm whether it's true or not," he thought grimly, afraid of what he would find. He sat down on the head of the famed Hokage in a meditative posture and reached within, or rather, spoke within. "Kyuubi, if you are inside me, I want to meet you. Please." For a full 5 minutes there was no reply, and Naruto was beginning to relax when something pulled on his mind. Naruto opened his eyes to find himself in a dark corridor. He narrowed his eyes. "Is this my mindscape?" he thought in disgust as he walked forward. He kept walking for a few minutes and stopped, seeing some light at the end of the corridor. It seemed to pull him towards it. Time to find out what is at the end. With that thought, he walked again, stopping only until the end. It was a huge room, so large and vast it was that the ceiling was impossible to find. He looked around, his eyes seeing black stone and nothing more. But the elephant in the room was a large iron-barred door, with a paper on it that said seal. He gazed at the piece of paper, resignation written in his eyes. His azure eyes looked past the cage. looking for what he knew was in the cage. He was just waiting for the QB to open his eyes. Based on what he had read, QB was a being of pure hatred and evil, a mindless beast capable of destruction on a scale hitherto undreamt of. But Naruto was skeptical when he read that. He might get to see it for himself now. A growl sounded from the cage, sending a breath of hot air in Naruto's face. Naruto steeled himself, in spite of the cage separating him from the beast within. An enormous red eye opened, causing Naruto to tense up. The eye looked at him as if evaluating him. The eye then started to rise, causing Naruto to look up at the massive form. The QB had orange, silky-looking fur, with black markings around his eyes connected to his, funnily enough, rabbit-like ears. The upper body was humanoid, including the hands. The lower body was just like a fox, barring the 9 long swaying tails in the back. Fire was the closest thing they looked like. The red, slitted eyes looked him closely with a hint of malice. Naruto spoke first. "Thank you for answering my call, QB," he said with a nod. The QB was surprised he didn't show it. Inside, however, he was mighty shocked. This was not the first thing he expected his jailer to say. He expected him to look at him with fear, asking whether he really was the QB, following with the denial of the possibility. He did expect him to thank him at all. He replied, "Think nothing of it. I'm surprised, though, that you were able to figure it out so quickly." "Why aren't you surprised?" he asked with curiosity. Naruto sat down in front of the cage, which surprised the great Bijou further. Naruto was showing that he was willing to relax in front of him. "Well, I was for a few moments at least, but it wasn't that difficult to figure out. It is easy to create a plausible theory once you have all the relevant facts," he said, never breaking eye contact with the QB. QB raised a massive eyebrow, silently impressed with his host. His thought processes were very intelligent for someone who was only 5 years old. He was bold as well, bold enough to maintain eye contact with him. He also could not sense any fear from the boy. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" he asked him. Without a moment of hesitance, Naruto answered, "Because you are misunderstood." This time surprise was visible on QB's face, which was quickly followed by anger. "What did you just say?" "Chose your next words very carefully," he growled out. Naruto wasted no time in answering. "In all the books I have read, they described you as a being of pure hatred. But that is only a one-sided understanding, isn't it?" he asked with a sad smile. Before QB could answer, Naruto continued, "Humans fear what they can't understand. The foremost aspect of your personality that they have seen is hatred, which, while a big part of you, conceals the being underneath that can feel emotions just like us. Isn't that right, QB?" QB was astounded at the amount of understanding his host showed towards him. Perhaps he could. "What do you want?" Naruto looked at him with his azure blues, reminding QB of another set of blues that looked at him fearlessly before sealing him. "If you wouldn't mind," a hesitant smile appeared on Naruto's face, "would you be my friend?" QB was truly stupefied at the request. For the first time in centuries of his existence, someone had asked if they could be his friend. Naruto saw that the QB was surprised, and for the QB, if Naruto's request was not surprising enough, he was totally blown away by what Naruto did next. Naruto got up from his spot and walked into the cage. He walked up close and offered a hand for him to take. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and it is nice to meet you." QB had abandoned all signs of remaining composed and was openly gaping at Naruto. But he composed himself quickly and gave a sincere smile to Naruto. Seeing Naruto was too small to even shake his finger, he extended his index nail to him. "My name is Kurama. Nice to meet you too, Naruto."